FPL managers, today I'm going to help you make those tough choices for your game week 1 draft, looking at the popular 50-50 choices and the player comparisons. First up, we got Saka versus Palmer. They aren't the exact same price, but 10 million and 10.5 million. Basically the same thing. They're both premiums and they're both in the midfield. Now, Palmer versus Saka, there is a clear winner right now. Palmer is the higher owned player. And I mainly believe that is due to the fixture run, because if you look at the underlying data last season, Saka was a little bit better than Palmer. Obviously, Saka missed nearly half the season through injury and Palmer played a lot of games. The differences between the two also is Saka overperformed his expected assists quite a bit, even though he doesn't really have a great striker around him. He was a little lucky, but then again, he did create a lot more big chances than Palmer despite having similar expected assists, which is why Saka managed to get more assists. In terms of goal scoring, they both underperformed their expected goals just a little bit, less than 0.1 per 90, so a very small underperformance. But you'd expect more from some of the best players in the league, which is a bit worrying considering they're both premiums. And, Palmer ended the season quite poorly. Saka hardly even ended the season because he didn't start more than 2 games in a row. So you can't really use that as judgment as to who you're bringing in your team, because neither one was really reliable towards the end of last season. But Palmer in the Club World Cup final looked amazing. I've not seen much of Saka in pre-season though. And while Saka does seem to be the more consistent player on the whole, if we're choosing one or the other, I'm choosing Cole Palmer. In fact, I believe he is the most essential player for game week 1, the player that everybody should be owning. Saka's fixture run simply isn't good enough. Even though it doesn't look so bad on the first 4, the games that follow aren't super easy, and playing away to Liverpool it's not a guaranteed blank, but I don't see Arsenal scoring more than 1 goal in that game. And if they do score, it's probably from a set piece. Saka may be taking it, maybe not. Who knows? As for Palmer, obviously he looked amazing in the Club World Cup final, but the fixture run medium to long term is amazing, and he's very high owned, which means he is the safer player to go for. Next up, we got the Man City left back debate. Guys, on the right, you have Gvardiol, more secure minutes, but because he's probably playing as a centre back most of the time, less goal threat. On the other side, you got Nori, who has less secure minutes, may not start every game, but more goal threat, more creative potential. Now, when choosing between these two players, it all depends on how much you think Nori is actually going to play. Because if the guy is starting week in, week out, playing at least 60 minutes, it's a no-brainer you pick him. But then you got Gvardiol, who is safer. If Nori is looking like an early sub in some games, like he's not going to play 60 minutes, or for some games he's not going to start, then you'd be looking to choose Gvardiol, because this Man City fixture run is very good, and it would be a good idea to own a Man City defender for it. In terms of the data last season, Nori's is kind of unreliable. The defensive data is what he picked up when playing for Wolves, same as the offensive data as well. At Man City, that could all change. The defensive data is obviously going to get a lot stronger. As for the attacking output, well, I can only imagine it would be greater, because when Gvardiol was left back, he was scoring a lot of goals. And last season, I think he was the player with the most expected assists to actually not register a single assist. He was quite unlucky, but that's what happens when you have an off-form Haaland up front. With Nori, he can get both goals and assists, and there's no chance he'd be playing anywhere but left back. The issue is there's a lot of left backs at Man City, and fair enough, there's also a lot of centre backs, but Gvardiol was almost the only nailed player in that Man City team throughout the entire season. Almost every single other position got rotated at least at one period during the Premier League last season. So if it's me right now, I'm picking Gvardiol over Nori if I'm picking a Man City defender, but I'm not locking in on Gvardiol, because if we look at pre-season and Nori is starting every game and it's looking like he's going to be nailed, then there's no doubt in my mind I'd pick Nori. It's one of them debates you got to sit on. Luckily, if you are planning a draft with either Nori or Gvardiol, they both cost the same amount, so it's not like it's going to be difficult to change your team around. It's just a straight swap from one to the other. So yeah, for now, we're going Gvardiol, but it could be Nori if he's looking nailed on at the beginning of the season. 2 powerhouse forwards in the next player comparison. We got 2 9 million players, Gyokeres, new player, and then Ollie Watkins. Now, in my opinion, Arsenal have one of the worst fixture runs from game week 1 to 6. Apart from that Leeds game, there's not many other good ones. Playing home to Forest ain't awful, but they're quite a solid defence at times as well. Then you've got Aston Villa. I believe they actually have the best fixture run in the first 6 game weeks, and that's not even considering the fact they play home to Burnley in game week 7. So I've always been a huge fan of Watkins, and he's been in a lot of my drafts, so I'm kind of biased here. What I have recognised when planning ahead is that owning Watkins from roughly game week 1 to game week 7 or 8, then switching to Gyokeres when Arsenal's fixture run gets really good is an amazing plan. And I know booking transfers in advance isn't great, but it's a fairly simple one to make. Watkins, consistent, doesn't normally get injured, playing for the first 8 game weeks, then switch to Gyokeres when the Arsenal fixture run gets good. as long as he's not a rotation risk, which I don't think he will be, it should be fine. So I've kind of given away who I prefer straight off the bat here. Gyokeres is obviously playing for a better team and was obviously one of the best strikers in the world last season. With Gyokeres in game week 1, we need to be careful. I've even seen some Arsenal fans say that Gyokeres may not be starting every single game. Obviously he'd start most, but they think Kai Havertz could be the first choice in some matchups. And if your 9 million strikers are not starting games, that's kind of a worry. What I do like about Gyokeres though is that Arteta said he may be on penalties. I mean, the way he said it, it seems like he's not the one choosing. Obviously Saka has them right now. And if Saka loses them, that takes away his appeal massively. But then Gyokeres becomes a £9 million striker, starting for one of the best teams in the league and on penalties. That would then make him the player to go for, if that makes sense. It's just a lot of what ifs at this point. In pre-season, he has not looked sharp though. He's not looked great, and there has been many cases where players have come from the easy leagues like Bundesliga and Liga and the Portuguese league. They've been amazing. Then they've come into the Premier League and they've been awful. Also, with Watkins, you've got a player who is on penalties and you know he's going to be starting every game because there's no competition with Rashford and Asensio, and he's already Premier League proven. Plus the fixture run, to me, I think Watkins is the much better decision, even though the majority of FPL disagrees with me because Gyokeres is currently on higher ownership. Let me know down in the comments, guys, what you think about Gyokeres versus Watkins, because this is the tough one. It seems like a lot of people don't side with me on it, but for me, you know, the data for Watkins last season was pretty good, and he's on penalties and he's Premier League proven. Gyokeres, there's a lot of risk there. Time for the 6.5 million midfielder debate. Now, there's other 6.5 million midfielders as well, and a lot of 6.5 million forwards like Welbeck, Raul Jimenez, Strand Larsen. You've also got 6.5 midfielders like Mitoma, but we're choosing Kudus versus Ndiaye here because I think they are the two most popular and the best options at 6.5 million attackers. I've even seen a lot of players with both of these guys in their teams, even sometimes tripled up with another 6.5 million midfielder in Ismaila Sarr, who is also very popular, but I don't think the Crystal Palace fixture run is anywhere near good enough to actually be picking Crystal Palace players. Everton probably have the best opening 3 fixtures in the league this season. Ndiaye, his data isn't amazing, but when you play like an amazing game week 1 to 4, you don't really need a player with amazing data. You just pick someone with average data, penalties, a good fixture run, and he can return you loads of points. Then you can swap him out for another 6.5 million attacker, which there are loads of, and you're getting the benefit of Ndiaye before his fixtures get bad and he loses most of his value, which he probably will because he's nothing spectacular. Then you got Kudus, amazing game week 1, amazing medium to long-term fixture run aside from that Man City fixture in game week 2. Now, you could look at this as a risk of minutes. Ultimately, I think the first few game weeks, Kudus will be given the green light to start most of the games. It only makes sense considering Tottenham paid quite a lot for him, and there's not a lot of competition on that right side. There is Brennan Johnson around, and if it looks like Kudus is going to be on the bench for the first few game weeks and he's not going to be starting every game week, then he goes from being one of the best 6.5 million midfielders to one of the worst, because all these other guys actually have reliable starts, and if Kudus does, he's definitely the best out there in my opinion, one of the most underpriced players in the game. But if the minutes are a risk, then it's the complete opposite. He becomes one of the worst and a player you want to avoid. But then again, we have seen players who come on as a sub most games and still manage to get consistent returns because of how they changed the game, and you know, they're playing against tired defenses who have been playing for 60 to 70 minutes. With Kudus coming on around that time of the game, he could be in with a good chance of a return. Garnacho, for example, last season, he didn't start many games, but I think he returned in more than 50% of his substitute appearances in the first 10 games of the season. So it can be done. Rotation risks can still bag points, but it's not exactly something you'll want to rely on. In terms of the Kudus data as well, that's from when he was at West Ham. It's pretty awful. His finishing was not amazing last season either. In terms of ownership, Kudus is the highest owned, one of the highest owned players in the game. In terms of 6.5 million attackers, he is the highest owned, and I agree with that to an extent. As long as his minutes are reliable, he is very good value. But for game week 1 in general, I prefer Ndiaye, however you say his name. I might have been saying it wrong this whole time. I prefer him because I'm a fixture man above everything else. You know, the data from both of these two is pretty much the same. It's very similar, except one of them has penalties and one of them doesn't. Also, Ndiaye has a better fixture run. Kudus doesn't. So for me, in game week 1, I'm picking Ndiaye over Kudus, but if you pick Kudus, that's fair enough. Last but not least, we have a debate that's not really being talked about a ton. I mean, yeah, Pedro is one of the highest owned players in the game, and Solanke is an amazing forward. He recently acquired penalties. Now Son is leaving. The only issue is Solanke seems to have a bit of a niggle and hasn't played any minutes in pre-season. So this debate I'm about to talk about could be a load of nonsense, because if Solanke's not going to start game week 1, then you're definitely not going to own him, because that home game to Burnley is the main appeal for Spurs players. On the contrary, if Solanke is going to start, I believe he is one of the best value forwards in the game. FPL priced him at 7.5 million before Son left, before Solanke had penalties. Now you've got a player from a Big Six team who is on penalties costing less than 8 million. He's also Premier League proven. I know he was a lot better at Bournemouth, but you know, sometimes your first season at a new club isn't amazing. And with Thomas Frank, strikers under Thomas Frank are usually quite good. I say that, I mean, the only striker I know that played under Thomas Frank was Wissa, and Wissa was great. So Solanke should hopefully be on a similar, trajectory. Hopefully Thomas Frank can bring the best out of him, playing like he was at Bournemouth. Also, who else is a striker at Spurs? I mean, I personally cannot name one. Brennan Johnson, I think, played up front in their last preseason game against Newcastle, so obviously he can play there, but that's more of a short-term fix than anything. When Solanke's back fully fit, I can't imagine him not starting pretty much every single game. Obviously, that is until Champions League comes around and Tottenham want to rotate their squad, but let's be honest, Tottenham probably won't get out of the, league table group stage section of the Champions League this season because they're not an amazing team. No disrespect to all of you Tottenham fans out there. As for Joao Pedro, I love the Chelsea fixture and I think he looked amazing in the Club World Cup final. And if you were to pick Joao Pedro over Solanke, that's fair enough because I'm still very tempted by him, even though I'm more of a Solanke man. Joao Pedro isn't as nailed as Solanke, but considering he can play in all four of them attacking positions, striker, left wing, right wing, even as a number 10, it makes his appeal a little better because, a lot of players, they can only play as a winger or a striker or a cam, whereas Joao Pedro can do them all, so when they need to rotate the team around, he could still be playing all the time, just in different positions. The issue is they've listed him as a forward, and if he doesn't play as a striker that often, you're getting a midfielder who's only getting 4 points for a goal. The only real reason I'm preferring Solanke over Joao Pedro is the acquisition of penalties. Before Solanke had penalties, I was very 50-50 on it, and I was more leaning towards Joao Pedro just because of how well he played in the Club World Cup final. But with Solanke being a little more nailed and on penalties, to me, he is the one to go for. Anyway, guys, that is it from me. If you do want more player comparisons, leave it down in the comments. I'm happy to do more because I know there's plenty more players to choose between. So yeah, make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video.